With one thought, I turn inwards, away from that focus where my attention has been most of the day on the outer world. At this time, I come inside, going very deeply inside, like going underground. And I feel my mind slowing down, releasing the unnecessary in this moment, gently coming into focus. It's the feeling of going to seed, the very essence of life, which in fact is the self. I'm used to having such a physical sense of self, and that creates a very physically based life. But what if I experience the seed, the self, in a different way? In a much more subtle way, not physical at all. The qualities of the self, the attitudes of the self, the vibration of the self, the very being. From this subtle seed, a completely different life emerges. One where far more attention is paid to what the senses, the physical senses, cannot perceive, with respect to the self, with respect to others, and with respect to situations. When I am in a subtle state, I'm far more sensitive to the subtleties around me, far more attuned to what is of greatest value. It's as if the heart undergoes a change, feeling different towards the self, others, and situations, just by coming to a subtle seed or sense of self. The more time I spend underground, at the seed, the more everything above ground continues to change in the heart. Om Shanti. Om Shanti. And welcome to Interview with Raj Yogi. Tonight's session is the seed of complete transformation. And so the topic of focus for today has actually been about being able to transform my character completely. And for those who've taken the Raja Yoga course, we often mention about there's a transition that's required. It's an interesting learning about what our ideas of change are, what happens even in day-to-day life in terms of what change is about. And so what do you feel is very unique about Raja Yoga in terms of what is change and how does change happen? I think we always have liked the symbol of the butterfly when we're looking at spiritual transformation or character transformation. And what that symbol tells us is, first off, whether it's a caterpillar or what we identify as a butterfly, it's all a butterfly. So what that's saying is that within that same being, there's capacities for different states, same being, capacity for different states. So that's really important when we're talking about transformation, that we're actually going to emerge something that's already there, but had become merged or latent, and something else had been acquired. So that's a key part of the transformation, is that we think of transformation, we think of something new, but actually it's not something new, it's something original that we are emerging. So it requires a lot of faith in that intrinsic state of the self, like complete acceptance or trust that that is my intrinsic or original state. That alone is going to help to start to emerge, and what needs to emerge, and subdue what needs to be subdued. But also, this idea that with the caterpillar, that it goes into the state where it, for all intents and purposes, seems to be dead. But a real shutting down, if you will, or an incredible letting go. So this renunciation or this letting go is going to be part of change. I can't go into something new and still hold on to the old. So this is going to make things very interesting, because yes, we're going to land up somewhere in between. And that chrysalis is a somewhere in between, going into a state or a process, if you will, which is between the old and the new. And the chrysalis, we feel, is very much involves, when it comes to the soul, very much involves the presence of God, that being's world is between the old and the new. So there's, I think, various aspects, but the main thing is I'm returning to something original. I'm going to have to let go of a lot of stuff because of now attaching to that faith in that original state. And I'm going to have to go into a process or an experience that feels a little bit like letting go of everything. But it's not, because in that experience, because we're involving God, there's going to be a lot of feeling of accumulating, of receiving. So it's not letting go to nothing, it's letting go of the old. So we say old to eternal to new. I do wonder, though, if we ever really can understand that there is a transition that's required. Because it may seem surprising, but I realize just how deep it is to try to make change, and yet there's no transition. It's not
No, I know that in the commentary about the seed of making that change happen, and it happens in day-to-day life. And I think I feel that I've seen it in many places. In terms of workplaces, for example, you have these courses you need to take in terms of how you need to be respectful to people, to respectful to your colleagues. You need to be able to listen better. So where does that, how is that possible to sustain that in terms of transition? Because ultimately, all these courses are about trying to have a certain way of, I guess you say, conducting oneself in different situations.
I remember I knew a soul who did house renovation. So this is very popular now. Where you buy an old house that looks like it has no value whatsoever. So you can get it at a very good price. And then you put it through this renovation, and it's this completely new, upgraded experience. And I used to really enjoy watching it because I realized there's two ways to go about it. One is, just slap another layer of paint or wallpaper on top and say it's new when the old stuff is still underneath there, or to peel it all off, right? Which is quite a bit of work sometimes, but to patiently remove all those layers and work from the bare bones. Now, he had an eye for seeing good bones, as it called, old homes that others saw no value in. He could see there's good bones there, but everything would have to be stripped right down to the essence, to the bones, and then build up a bit again from there. And it was remarkable. But I always found it was such a beautiful sort of metaphor for what we're trying to do spiritually. We're not trying to put another layer on, different methods or techniques, and the old stuff's still kind of festering underneath. But we're actually going to strip away with the faith that there's good bones underneath there.
So, in terms of when you say good bones, when it comes to these courses that have to happen, souls have to take these courses. I had to take these courses, when it comes to managing others and so forth. Do you find that there's any, I guess, salvaging good bones in that sense? What makes Raj Yoga unique in that way? And in terms of that, when you were sharing about just that recognition of something really deep inside as I make that change happen, I was thinking about, is that really a part of them, those good bones?
I think if we go through the process, if we try to go at it with taking the courses, and they're really trying to trigger that intrinsic goodness in the soul as well, that we are good people and we want to, but it doesn't necessarily address the stuff that's accumulated, those layers of old stuff. So what it actually does is, yes, I'm very nice and I'm very kind, but it's draining the soul because the other stuff is still there. It's not really coming from the heart, still a bit on the surface. I know this is how I should act, but I still have other feelings underneath there. So having the courage to put aside what it looks like and to dive deeply, just be focused on getting right underneath all the layers of the self to those good bones, if you will, that intrinsic core, getting right to the very seed of the self, not too concerned. We say not as much on outcomes as the income now, not so concerned of what it might look like at any given time. I always find it fascinating, even today, couldn't stop thinking about this one lesson we heard of souls who come into the spiritual practice and they get very, very engaged in it, and then they suddenly leave. And what happened? Like, did it go deep enough? Did I go deep enough inside? because I could still have a little anger or a little hurt or these things festering underneath. It looks really good on the surface, but the other stuff is still there. So being willing to not so concerned about the surface, but healing at a very deep level.
Just wanted to acknowledge a question from a soul that they're asking where this is streaming from. This is Calgary, Canada. So I was thinking about just what you're sharing in terms of being able to go deep enough and being able to, there's all this stuff you're saying that needs to be addressed. And sometimes souls think of spirituality and go, oh my gosh, I don't want to address that stuff. What is that going to look like? Psychotherapy. And so things will come up. What has your experience been like, in terms of things coming up? I know you've mentioned in many sessions in the past about understanding, and you've shared a lot of the knowledge. Practically speaking, what has that understanding? Have you felt it's gone deeper? Your reactivity has gone lower through time. Your capacity to watch things coming up inside, and while holding on to those deep bones of who you are, to be able to make this transition so there's no violence. What has that experience been like personally for you?
I think what the spiritual study like Raj Yoga provides is what we call that big picture, to be able to stand outside of the self a little bit, and become an observer of everything, to know that big picture, both what my intrinsic state is as well as what happened to me, that understanding. That's really important. So that what I've noticed most of all is, even if there is still reactivity, I now have a different response that doesn't simply reinforce or deepen that where that reactivity is coming from. So we have this tool that we call in the study, this discus of self-understanding that's so critical in managing the self, as all sorts of things flare. And I know who I am, I know who I am not. So there's a lot of understanding. So the stuff still can come up, but it's because I have a different response to it. It's as if I'm breaking a cycle within the self.
It's interesting to mention when there's reactivity to actually have a different response. And have you found that becomes more and more natural? Because when we're mentioning about this seed of complete transformation, I was thinking about something that you've mentioned before. There is the what, and then there's the how. And we want to keep like, this is what I'm becoming, this is what I'm becoming. And then as you were talking about, things come up inside. And I feel that sometimes we're supposed to think, like, how could I not feel bad when there's the activity going on? And one of the things that I find that's so unique about the study that you mentioned about that, there is a bigger picture of knowing who I really am. But it's not just a nice blind or false hope or blind hope, faint hope, that no, this is really actually who I'm moving towards. It's not just something that I'm just trying to tell myself as reactivity comes up.
Yes, I don't think any of this will really work if there isn't complete recognition or faith, or you could even say trust. That I'm not saying this is a good idea, but that, okay, I really recognize this is who I am, this is what happened, I completely have accepted it. So again, that deep faith in the intrinsic goodness of the self, and understanding what happened so that I can hold that reactivity and not feel it's as if I'm re-wounding myself every time it comes up. And there's definitely, I think, some deeper stuff and some less deep stuff. So the less deep stuff is easier to sort of brush off. And the really deep stuff, I think, really, can affect souls deeply. And that's around things like ego and self-respect. So it's an art, this self, managing the self through the transformation, using the spiritual tools.
We're talking about complete transformation, and for those who are not in the study or not taking the course, we're talking about complete transformation of character, and just reflecting again about the commentary about what needs to happen inside. And could you share more? I know it was in the commentary, but just what needs to happen at such a deep level, because it's really not visible.
Yeah. So earlier we were talking about, making changes more on the surface while things are still festering underneath. So what we want to do for complete transformation is actually get to the seed, the deepest level possible, which is the seed, and make a transformation there. And it's a bit like the epicenter of an earthquake. It's going to ripple through my character and rearrange things, put everything back into its original state. So we use a couple of things to make that, to get to the seed. One is knowledge of who I am at core. So this idea of going deeply into the experience of being a soul, but also being a child of the Supreme Soul, which really gives me a very deep, eternal sense of self. So going right to the seed and just allowing, is experiencing that as much as possible, trusting that that will ripple through like an earthquake through the character and put things back into their original state. So I don't have to sort of go at things. If I want complete transformation, I have to go completely to the seed, which is consciousness.
So just take another pause. And so there are multiple centers in Canada. And if you're interested in visiting any of the Canadian centers, please go to brahmakumaris.ca and you'll be able to see which centers in Canada that you would like to visit. And you might want to check out the email address so you can reach out to us ahead of time to make sure that the center is actually open because here in Canada, there are different business hours and so forth. So, okay, so back to what we were sharing about, actually, I was thinking about when you're speaking about the seed, what does that, because oftentimes souls would feel that spirituality and physicality are completely separate. And is it possible while I'm walking and moving around, in a conversation right now, to actually feel the seed of who I am? And maybe it's conscious or not, but it's like, I don't have time, but this is happening. Wait till this thing is done. Wait till I go on vacation. Wait till I'm in the mountains. And when I'm in the mountains, when it's a natural nature, that's when I can feel spirituality. That's common. So these ideas, is it possible to feel that seed? And that's one of the biggest things for souls.
It really comes down to what has become a habit, because we don't seem to have any problem experiencing ourselves as physical beings while we're doing all those things that you talked about, walking, moving around. So what we're talking about is experiencing myself as a spiritual being while I'm doing all those things. And the irony is that's, of course, who I actually am. So, of course, it's something in fact, the physical is shaped by the spiritual. They're not mutually exclusive at all, but have a deep relationship. But it's going to mean a lot of attention in the transition, because it's become such a deep habit that while I'm doing everything, I have a physical sense of self. Just while I'm doing everything, I want a qualitative or spiritual sense of self. So we always say, Om Shanti, I am a being of peace, simply to have that experience of the self while I'm doing everything. So it's perhaps not so crazy.
It reminds me when you're talking about just stripping everything down to the bare bones when you were talking about that, because it feels like from when you're sharing that it's so much to do with, do I actually recognize that I am a soul or not? To actually be able to do that, because you can have good thoughts about the self, and maybe try to reframe the way a situation is like. But I was thinking back to what you're talking about, just for change to really happen, it seems like something that really deep has to shift inside.
Yes, and I think again we've talked about before the timing's very unique for each person when they will feel comfortable doing that, because that shift, although it's moving towards something, it is letting go of a lot that's become very, very familiar. So when each of us is ready, then like the caterpillar going into chrysalis, then we begin to do that. But that shift at what we call again the seed is really what makes it so powerful. I'm shifting that consciousness, that sense of self from I am a physical entity, a body, to I am a spiritual entity, a soul. So obviously that reframing of self is going to require a lot of letting go, but it's also moving into a very different experience of the self. So when the soul is ready, then it will return to the self.
Om Shanti Ashish. So perhaps maybe we will see you here in Canada. And so, just perhaps maybe one final question then about that is what has your experience been like in terms of the senior students that you've met in the study when we're talking about complete transformation? Because sometimes we're actually quite deceived by looking at the outside and thinking, what does perfection look like? And what is your experience like seeing such a transformation in character and the seniors? And what is it that makes it unique? What is it that you're feeling that you can sense that this really is transformation, not just something that's on the outside?
Two things. I think the senior students really did this spiritual journey very well, which we call using knowledge and yoga, this connection to God in my original state. I think they did that simple. Sometimes we do a lot of other things and not just that one thing, whereas I feel they didn't do all those other things. They just did that one thing. And, Daddy Jenki used to talk about cleaning, 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 cleaning the memory track, the chit, cleaning, cleaning. So I really always felt that they were doing that main thing, and the transformation was happening inside. They really, it rippled out, of course, but they really were looking so intently what's going on inside. And I think that one of the biggest signs of their transformation is the level of tolerance that they developed. Um, to be completely free of ego and fear is a sign that I've really done the work. So many situations where they had to be tolerant, where they'd be insulted, and they were completely unaffected. They were really in that true stage of the self that I am a peaceful being. Um, and it wasn't for show, or they really had done the inner work.
It's a deep topic to try to cover in about 25 minutes. But if anything, it inspires souls. What is that transformation? And really to look at the foundation and the studying. So we'll have a little reflection.
Each of us reaches a point in our journey where our understanding of change is quite externalized, that things have to change outside, moving to a different city or different job or different set of friends or different home or some sort of external change is where we focus, not realizing that everything operates from the inside out. Even if I'm to change my location or my work or my friends, the old will come with me. True change, deep transformation must happen within the self without even changing anything outside. Just focusing within the self deeply, going to the very point of the self, remembering who and what I truly am. Very elevated, powerful soul. Truly a child of the Supreme Soul. Not just thinking these things, but feeling them. It's not even letting them enter the heart, but allowing them to emerge from the heart. They're already there. Allowing it to emerge into our consciousness. Just focusing on this single experience and letting it have whatever effect it will have on the outer world. Knowing that whatever changes happen around me will be aligned with what's going on inside me. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti. So thank you for joining with us this evening. Thank you for your messages, Ashish. Again, if souls want to check out the Canadian Brahma Kumaris national website, it's brahmakumaris.ca. The Calgary's website is calgary.brahmakumaris.ca. And you're welcome to see other on-site and online programs. A reminder, we have an English workshop at the Inner Peace Center next week, February, I don't remember what day it is, but February 4th. And it is from 1 o'clock to 4:30. Registration is required, and it is only on site for those who wish to join. We will be having one more session next Tuesday. If it works, we will be taking a pause with that, and we'll have still the full hour of meditation called Experience on the Tuesdays. So if all goes to plan, it would actually be February 14th to March 7th, those Tuesdays between that time span. Instead of the interview, we'll be having a full hour of meditation there. And so if anything changes, we'll make sure to note that for souls. And so thank you for joining with us. Again, please visit the website for upcoming sessions. Om Shanti.